name is Nolan. This encounter takes place in southern Ohio, off of I-71 at a rest area. I was the idiot who said I didn't need coffee and then got sleepy anyway. I pulled into the rest area by Jeffersonville, trucks stacked nose to tail. It was around 2:30 in the morning. The inside of the building smelled like bleach and those cinnamon roll things they never actually bake. The vending machine ate my quarters, and that's what kept me standing there longer than I'd planned, just staring at the make another selection light blinking like it was making fun of me. I heard this squeak sound out by the glass doors, like shoes on a gym floor, except it wasn't that. It was claws on the wet. Outside it was raining, that misty rain that gets stuck in your beard. I looked up and saw what I thought was a German Shepherd outside the sliding doors. My brain instantly went, someone's service dog. And then the shape stood. That's the part my head just argues with constantly. It rose up like it was tired of crouching. Its shoulders were higher than the push bar. The motion set off the doors and they slid open, and it just stood in the threshold like it was feeling the warm air from inside. Couple details here because people always ask. The color was dark, not black like a jacket, more like wet bark. Its ears were up, not floppy. The eyes reflected a weird steel blue from the ceiling lights, not glowing on their own, just throwing the light back. The chest wasn't bodybuilder wide. It looked strong, yeah, but more like a track runner. There was a line of older folks at the bathrooms behind me, and nobody seemed to see it. It leaned forward and touched the glass with the side of its head, like dogs do when they want inside. The doors kept trying to close on its shoulders and then opening again, so it made this soft chuff like it was annoyed. I kept thinking about my drink like an idiot, because that's what I was doing before my brain got scrambled. I can't even explain why I was thinking the way I was. Seeing this will definitely have a strange effect on you. It didn't try to come in fully. It stood there sniffing. It did this tilt, like it was checking out the entire room, and then it looked at the hand dryer like the noise bothered it. A pickup pulled under the awning and the headlights hit across the legs, digitigrade, like a dog's back legs if they were welded onto a person. It didn't have a tail that I saw. It turned smooth, and those claws ticked across the mat. You could hear it, even over the rain. I waited till the doors finally shut and I could see my face in the glass. And that's when it hit me that if I left now, I'd have to walk right where it stood. So I hung around pretending to read the tourist brochures about antique malls and the world's largest basket. After maybe a minute, I went out with two truckers like we were a team. The parking lot felt hollow. It was quiet, in a way that I don't like. When I got back on my drive, a shape ran the ditch 2 car lengths ahead of me for maybe 4 seconds. This wasn't fast like in a movie, more like it was keeping pace to look. It peeled off at a culvert and I didn't see it again. I got to my sister's place at dawn. I told her I almost got into a fight with a soda machine. I left out the rest. For 3 weeks after, I woke up at random times, sure something was standing outside listening to me sleep. Then I would stay awake the rest of the night listening to my refrigerator hum. Might be nothing, but the motion light popped a few nights and there weren't any cats or raccoons on the cameras, just a gray smear low to the ground like fog where the lens couldn't quite make out or focus on whatever it was. If you do share this, thank you. I appreciate the time and the effort to help people that are strangers to you. It's a very noble deed, and I appreciate it. Take care. Nolan. This encounter comes from an individual who goes by the name of Sherry from Attala County, Mississippi. Reels. My job is keeping the town's water tasting like water. People forget somebody watches it at night. It's me and the frogs. You do laps, check clarifiers, walk the perimeter, log the chlorine feed, listen for anything that sounds wrong. I bring a thermos of coffee and a bag of peanut butter crackers. That's my entire nightlife. Exciting, I know. This was in the early spring, the wind out of the south. A bit of lightning way off, but no rain yet. The chain-link fence rattled the way it does when a big rig passes on 12, except there was no trucks passing. I turned on my headlamp that way and saw fence diamonds moving on their own. I thought raccoon at first. Then I caught a shape lower than the top rail, but taller than me. It was bent up against it, pushing its weight. It wasn't climbing. It's more like it was pushing on it, trying to knock it down like you would a door with your shoulder. Here's where it got odd. Well, more odd. It sniffed through the mesh, and it was extremely loud. Like the sound you get when you try to smell if milk's gone off. The face wasn't flat, muzzle like a shepherd, but the cheek fur looked all out of sorts, like it had rubbed raw spots. My light hit its eyes, and they had this yellow-green color to them that you'd see in a deer sometimes, except the pupils narrowed and moved. They almost tracked the light. When it blinked, the lid came up from the bottom halfway, then the top lid finished it. I don't know why that sticks with me, but it does. I started yelling, "Hey," like that's ever gonna help. It jerked, like it didn't expect me to speak. Then it did something that messed me up worse than growling would have. It put one hand through the mesh. Not a paw. A hand with long fingers, pads underneath, nails I won't call claws because claws feel like cat to me, and these were more like roofing nails, but darker. It raked slow across the inside of the fence like it could feel the vibrations. The clarifier skimmer clacked from behind me and it cut its eyes in that direction. It was paying attention to the sound of the water. I swear to you, it moved along the fence, matching me while I walked on my side. This thing wasn't scared or nervous. Not that it was super aggressive, but it definitely put me in a state of panic. It was shadowing me every move I made. When I hit the gate, I got inside the little control building and watched from the window. It angled toward the settling basin and crouched right at the concrete lip, reached down, and tapped the water. Just the pads of 2 fingers I could see where the surface dimples spread. My brain keeps wanting to say it was curious like a child, and I hate myself for thinking that because then it stood up and you could see how wrong the proportions were. Its thighs were too long, calves like a spring. A siren kicked on for the chemical room because I tripped it, hitting every switch I own. That's when it moved fast. Straight line back to the far fence, one hand on the line post. Then it was gone along the ditch like the ground had a track made for it. The weird thing is it didn't seem to run or make steps. It was almost like it was floating, like a gliding motion. The next morning, the superintendent said a coyote probably pressed against the mesh. I went out and pointed at the height of the smear on the galvanized where something's shoulder pressed and left hair stuck to the fence. He wouldn't touch it. I bagged it because people like me bag things like this when we don't know what else to do. I set the bag in a lab fridge for a day. Then I started getting scared, thinking about who may show up or what may happen if I kept it. Then I threw it out. It just felt wrong of me to keep it. Since then, every time that skimmer clacks at night, I feel watched. I did put a chain through the gate, even though the latch is good. That doesn't help. But my hands like the motion anyway. Thanks, Reels. I know this wasn't a super exciting encounter, but it's what happened. Sherry. This next email, the subject line is blown tire on I-17, north of Black Canyon City, Arizona. My truck spits out weird problems on the hottest of days. The rear tire's sidewall peeled like a banana. I limped to the shoulder where the guardrail ends and there's that gravel slope down to nothing. It was late. I had the jack on the axle and the lug wrench halfway turned when some rocks slid down the slope like somebody nudged them with a boot. Now, I'm not a gun guy, never have been, but I had a tire iron. And when you're out there, a tire iron feels like a sword. I stood up and the slope looked empty. Then not empty. A shape like a coyote, drawn tall. Its head was too big for the neck. It jumped between manzanita so I could clock the full body. It kept dropping low and the ears would keep giving it away. I told myself it was two animals. Then it stood in the clear where the weeds thin out and I had to quit lying to myself. Its chest worked like a bellows. You could hear it even with semis whining on the grade. It did this sort of U-walk, wide, slow path that would put it behind me in about a minute if I didn't spin. I spun. It stopped. We did that 3 times. I got mad at myself for dancing with a silhouette, so I put my back to the bed, grabbed the half-mounted spare, and kept talking out loud like a moron. I see you. Don't be dumb. The voice helped me not drop the lugs. It made a noise. Now, I've heard coyotes, bobcats, mountain lions. This ain't it. This sounded like somebody practicing a word through a straw. 2 syllables like he and ah. Dry as cotton. Loud, but not a roar, not a howl. More like a test. It copied my hey. It wasn't perfect, but close enough to land, and I knew what it was doing. A pickup came in hot and blew past the pressure wave, rocked the truck on the jack. The shape flattened to the ground like cloth, then it sprung back up again. As soon as the spare hit the studs, I spun the nuts by hand and hit them with the iron and dropped the jack like it owed me money. When the tire took the weight, I jumped in and drove the rim a few feet before I remembered to grab the jack. I stopped long enough to yank it out and tossed it so hard it bounced off the tailgate and chipped some paint. In the mirror, it was running in the gravel's edge and cut sharp across the lane behind me when there was finally a break in traffic, like it was crossing to the median. This thing wasn't suicidal, it timed it perfect. The last I saw, it moved down the divider, swall, hunched over like a linebacker, with a hurt rib. A trooper passed me a mile later going the other direction. I almost flagged him, but then I pictured explaining to him and watched him go. For 2 weeks after this, I kept that same tire iron behind my couch. Stupid, I know. Sometimes you need a solid thing close by when your brain replays a noise that should not exist. I have one more encounter, and I'll try to email you soon. Ephraim. I drive nights hauling produce from the distribution center. I was outside Gainesville, Florida, on 441. Anyone that knows 441 knows the billboards. Half of them still advertising fireworks stands that closed before I was born. I pulled over at one of those gravel pull-offs because my trailer strap had worked loose and I didn't want squash rolling everywhere. While I'm down on a knee with my flashlight, I catch movement up at the billboard slope. I had no idea what this was. It looked like it was sniffing at the weeds, so dog is what my brain said. I said, "Hey, pup," but it didn't move like a dog. It was too tall in the chest, and the back end was low like it was crouched but not crouched enough. I know how crazy and weird that description is, but that's what I saw. I shined it. I shouldn't have. The whole face caught the light. That billboard's floodlight hit from behind, too. So for once, I wasn't stuck with a silhouette or a shadow. This thing had a muzzle like a Doberman, but its hair was patchy, not smooth. Its mouth hung open and I could see teeth. And they were too even, like somebody drew them with a ruler. The thing pulled itself up the steel I-beam like it wasn't even trying. Its hand wrapped around the flange and you could hear its claws, I assume what was claws, digging into the metal. I froze up halfway between wanting to finish the strap and wanting to get in the cab. Then it leaned out, halfway sideways like a rock climber, and looked straight down at me. It was just holding there. I don't know what it was planning, if it was even planning anything. The strap ratchet clanked, and it cocked its head like it memorized the sound. I left the strap half done, climbed in the cab, and fired the truck. When the lights hit it full, I saw both knees bent backwards like a dog, but with way more length. It clung to that beam until I pulled back on the road. The last glimpse of it was it moving sideways behind the board like it was living up there. That's been almost 10 years. And now every time I see one of those old fireworks signs, I keep expecting to see a shape up top, hanging off like it was part of the structure. I rerouted down 301 more than once because of this. It took me a while to admit that it wasn't just my nerves. I was dodging billboards. This thing really messed me up. I'm not a very good writer, so I imagine this wasn't very hard hitting. But trust me, this really did a number on me. Thanks, Anonymous. Hey there, Reels. My name is Elaine, and I'm from Western Kentucky. Now, this didn't happen in deep woods. It was the picnic area but behind our little Baptist church. Summers, we'd have potlucks under the pavilion. This was late fall, though no one was around. Leaves were piled on the concrete pad. I went down there to check if the tarps needed tightening before winter hit. Dragging one corner tight, I heard the benches move and scrape. It was the wood sliding on cement. I thought maybe some kid was hiding down there smoking, It's happened before. I walked around and there was one of the tables shifted crooked, but it wasn't a person at all. I was hit with a smell. It wasn't garbage, it was wet dog mixed with a copperish tone, almost like blood or pennies. Something was crouched under the table with the bench tilted. At first glance, you would have thought for sure that a huge dog was stuck under there. Its shoulders cleared the seat, back, and the head turned sideways like it didn't fit right. It was too big. Its eyes were a sharp yellow. They weren't glowing, they were just sharp. That's the only way I can put it. I whispered under my breath, like an idiot, and the thing eased out, using its hands on the concrete. It did have hands on its front legs, not paws. It rose enough that the roof beams of the pavilion made it hunch. You ever see a dog try to stand inside a car? That look? But the arms were long, almost dragging its fingers on the ground. Its muzzle had gray in it like an old animal, though the body was extremely thick. I couldn't move. I kept telling myself, this is the church grounds. This isn't supposed to happen here. It didn't lunge, it brushed one of the posts with its hand, flat palm, then ducked out the back where the leaves were piled up. You could hear them crunch long after I lost sight of this creature. I left the tarp half loose. The pastor asked why I didn't finish, and I just said the wind picked up. Every Sunday since, when I sit in service, I can see the picnic shelter out the stained glass. I just hope that that was a freak accident, that I was at the wrong place at the wrong time. I really hope that that thing's not still waiting for the day we all gather out there. You would never think to see one of these things near a church. If they're evil, which I'm not sure how I feel about that, but if they are, as so many claim, how can they pop up at random near or even inside of churches? I really don't even know what to think anymore. Thanks, Reels. Elaine. Hi, Reels. I don't know where to really start with this, so I'll just jump in. I live outside of Peoria, Illinois, and I work as a night custodian at one of the community colleges here. I actually enjoy my job, and it does pay the bills, so I can't complain. Usually I'll put on your channel through my phone while I'm mopping or emptying trash cans. You make my nights go by much faster. Anyway, this happened back in March of this year. I was driving home from work. It was about 12:30 at night, so it was pretty late. I take a back road because it saves me about 10 minutes of driving. It's mostly farmland on both sides with a couple old barns and a stretch of woods that runs along a creek. I've taken that road so many times. I could drive it half asleep. That night was different, though. It had just rained earlier, so the road was slick, and you could smell that damp earth smell. I was about halfway down that stretch when something crossed the road ahead of me. My first thought is obviously just some sort of animal, a deer, but this was something I noticed immediately. It was way too big, and it moved different. It was upright right after it hit the blacktop. It was on all fours before that. As soon as its feet touched the asphalt, it stood up. It wasn't perfectly straight. It was kind of hunched forward, but definitely on two legs. The second it hit the gravel shoulder, it dropped back down on all fours and covered that ditch in 2 bounds, or less. I couldn't believe how fast it was. I still can't get over the speed. What stuck with me was the size. On 2 legs, it had to be a good foot or 2 taller than me, and I'm 6 foot even. Its arms, or maybe front legs, I don't even know what to call them, were long enough that when it went down on all fours, they didn't look out of place. They were just made for that. Its back was broad like a linebacker, and its head was nothing like a bear or a person. It looked like a wolf, but the muzzle seemed shorter, if that makes sense. I only saw it for maybe 2 or 3 seconds tops, but my stomach dropped when I realized what I was looking at. I didn't dare stop the car, I just kept rolling. My hands were locked like a vice on the steering wheel the rest of the way home. I remember my heart rate was dangerously high and didn't slow down for at least an hour after I got back. I borderline had a panic attack. I've seen plenty of coyotes, deer, and bobcat, you name it, bears even. But this wasn't a normal animal, I can tell you that now. These things are something else. I don't think they're just regular living, breathing creatures. They have an aura about them. Something isn't right. Since that, I don't take that road anymore. I go the long way around. My wife thinks I'm being dramatic, but I can't shake it. Just the way it could move from all fours to upright so quickly. The way it ran and the speed. I don't care what anybody says. These things are definitely real. I don't know what they are, or how they came to be, or if they've been here the whole time, we just didn't know it. But they are definitely out there. Anyway, I figured I'd share since you always say everyone needs to share to spread to more people. Take care of yourself and keep doing what you're doing. Anonymous.
Hello, Reels. I'm sending you this because I've heard multiple encounters and multiple people say the same thing. Their dogs or their animals knew something was out there before they did. I believe that now more than ever. If it wasn't for our German Shepherd, Mags, I might have never noticed what was standing right in my own backyard. This happened last October. My wife was in bed and I had passed out on the couch with the TV on. I remember waking up to Mags barking, but not her normal "there's a car in the driveway" bark. This was harsh, steady, with this deep growl between each one like she was warning something off. We had had animals get into the trash, of course, like most people. But she just kept going. Bark, pause, growl, bark again, like she wasn't going to stop until I paid attention. I was too tired to deal with it and didn't think much of it, so I rolled over. She just kept getting louder and more aggressive, and finally started rubbing her nose and pushing my arms. So I got up, still half asleep, and walked to the back door. Our porch light automatically flips on with motion, so by the time I stepped out, it was shining across the yard. Mags was stiff. Her tail was straight, hackles all the way up. She wasn't barking at the fence like she usually does when the neighbors walk by. She was locked dead on the woods at the very back of our property. That's when I felt my skin start to crawl. I opened the door and stepped out onto the porch. I had my little flashlight in hand because I keep it on the table by the door. I turned it on and shined it across the yard. Nothing but toys, the bird feeder, the swing my kids barely use anymore. Then the beam hit something else. Something standing in the trees. I'll be honest, Reels. My brain did not even want to register what I was looking at. It looked like a dog, but it was standing tall on two legs. Its head was at least 2 feet or more higher than the top of the old fence post out there. The shape was broad enough through the shoulders, but its frame was sort of skinny or lean, cut. It was like an athletic swimmer or some kind of track star. The ears were up, stiff like a shepherd's, and the eyes, when the light passed over them, they had this blue reflection. Mags went wild. She started barking crazily, growling even more, and she moved to stand between me and the trees. She was circling like she couldn't decide if she wanted to attack or retreat, but she never once took her eyes off of that thing. And the thing, it didn't move much. I didn't see it flinch at all. It didn't even act surprised that we were there. It just stood there like it had been waiting for us to notice it. I should have gone back inside right then and there. I even thought about it. But some stupid part of me wanted to see more. Now, to be clear, before this, I had heard of Dogman. And I'd also heard people that never had an encounter say they want to have one. I used to think those people were absolutely insane. But after seeing one myself, I kind of understand. It scares you, but you want to see and know more. You have questions, and you think by having an encounter those questions will be answered. But I don't think that's the case. Anyway, there was this huge, thick root sticking out of the ground, and it put one of its hands up, bracing itself. It didn't look like a dog paw because I say hand, and that's what it looked like. It was long, but I could see the fingers, and the way it pressed down looked like it was holding itself up in some weird way. The nails weren't shining claws, just long, dark black, and appeared to be curved. Next, I was hit directly in the face by something, some kind of smell. It wasn't rot or blood or anything like that. It was a strong, sour, ammonia-like stench. The exact kind of smell you get when a male dog lifts his leg on a post, only 1,000 times stronger, heavier, and a lot more bitter in your nose. That's when it clicked with me that this thing wasn't just standing there, it was marking its territory, like it was staking a claim on my own yard. Mags must have picked up on it long before I did, because she had been and kept nosing at the air, pacing, barking like she knew what it meant. Next, I did something very, very dumb. I kneeled down and grabbed one of those slick, round stones out of our landscaping, threw it directly at this thing and yelled, "Get out of here," and started stomping on the porch. My voice was definitely not very confident, and it was cracking, which probably made me sound more scared than tough. The thing just tilted its head for a second. I swear it almost looked like it was amused. Then it turned as smooth as anything and went back into the tree line. I stood there for a long minute with Mags still growling. I remember shaking so bad the flashlight was bouncing all over the yard. I didn't go running after it, of course, I'm not crazy, but I did go down the next morning in the daylight. Sure enough, that smell was still there, sharp and sour in one particular patch of grass. Even though the dew was heavy, I could still smell it. Mags would not even go near it. She sniffed once and whined and backed away. A few days after that, that exact patch of grass all died out. I don't know what can urinate so strong that it will kill grass, but it did. For the next week, she wouldn't step into that corner of the yard. She'd walk all the way around it in a big circle if she had to, but she would not set one paw on it. Every time I saw her do that, my stomach would knot up, because if she could still smell it, maybe it was still coming back. That really bothered me. Not that I saw it once, but the fact that my dog acted like that it hadn't even left, that it was still returning. I started sleeping in the recliner by the back door for a few nights, just to listen, just to make sure. I set a little motion light closer to that tree line. It went off twice, but when I went out, there was nothing there. Just that same sick smell hanging in the breeze. Like I said, it's almost been a year now, and Mag still won't go into that corner of the yard. She'll bark at squirrels, chase cats, act like her normal self everywhere else. But that one patch of yard might as well be lava to her. I can't explain it. All I know is she tried to warn me before I saw it. If your listeners take anything from this story, it's this. Always, always love, take care, and trust your animals. T. Southern Indiana. Hey, Reels. Now, I've been a listener on your channel long enough to know that if you read this, people are not going to call me crazy. That's precisely why I'm willing to do it. My girlfriend still won't talk about this at all, but my cat hasn't been the same since it happened. Now, we live in a third-floor apartment right off a busy street in Houston, Texas. Not exactly the kind of place you'd expect something like this to happen. I always figured these Dogman stories, these things were out in the country or on long stretches of dark highway. But it came right up to our window, like it didn't care who lived there or who saw it. It was just after midnight on a Sunday. My girlfriend and I were sitting on the couch, some late-night comedy rerun playing in the background, and our cat Bruno was sprawled out on the armrest. He's a big Tom, lazy most of the time, but he's got that streak where he thinks he's a guard dog when he hears someone in the hall. On this particular night, he went stiff out of nowhere. One second he was half asleep, the next his ears were pinned flat and his eyes were locked straight at the blinds covering our sliding glass door. This guy started howling and made this low, rasping growl I've never heard from him in my life. I started to wonder if maybe there was another stray cat out there. My girlfriend leaned over to peek through the blinds, but before she touched them, they rippled on their own, like someone brushed a hand against the glass from outside. That's when Bruno hissed, back was arched, his tail puffed like a bottle brush. He ran under the couch so fast he knocked the remote on the floor. And that's the exact moment that I saw it. I yanked the blinds up and pressed my face close to the glass, and there was a head staring right back at me. Now, there's no rational thought here. You can't say, wow, that's a huge dog. It's level with me. And I'll remind you, we were on the third floor. Its muzzle was pressed against the glass. Its nostrils were flared out, fogging up the window. The eyes glowed a dirty yellow from the reflection of the streetlight. They weren't curious, like a normal animal's. They were steady, looking at me like it was trying to debate on what was going to happen next. It was studying the situation. I'll be honest, that's the moment that I froze up. I should have turned, I should have gone for something, but all I could do was stand there inches from it with only glass between me and what I would assume would be death, and a gruesome death at that. It curled its lips, not all the way, not showing all the teeth, just enough to show the length of one canine. The breath hit the glass and smeared it. It was wet. My girlfriend screamed and grabbed my arm, and that kind of broke the trance I was in. I screamed, banged the door with my palm, and the thing blinked once, then backed off into the shadow like it was retreating on purpose. Against my better judgment, and I don't really understand why to this day, but I slid the door open just a crack. I guess I still couldn't believe what I just saw was real. The smell rolled inside. This was something sour, musky. It didn't smell like garbage or copper or blood like other people have stated. This was a strong urine stink. This is the same way a dog would mark a corner, only it was a lot more potent. I looked down at the balcony floor, and there was a damp spot near the rail, shifting under the light like it had marked right there before pressing its face to the glass. And I don't know the purpose of this, but this thing didn't just pass by our complex. It left a sign, a mark, if you will. I slammed the door shut and locked it. Bruno stayed under the couch the rest of the night, growling at nothing. The next morning, I checked the balcony. The wet patch had dried, but the smell was still there when the sun hit. My neighbor, who smokes out there all the time, asked if I'd seen a dog that had been peeing on our porch. I just shrugged because I didn't really know what else to tell her. For weeks after that, Bruno would not even go near that sliding door and would stand and stare at it. He used to sit there for hours watching birds or traffic, but now he keeps to the far corner of the room. Sometimes if I slide the blinds open at night, he will just run and hide like he already knows what's on the other side. Also, about a month later, another tenant 2 floors down told me their dog went ballistic one night, barking at their balcony until it shredded the blinds. They never saw anything, but I didn't need to hear any more to know what probably happened. What happened that night is definitely burned into my head. Yellow eyes, the breath fogging up the glass, how close I was to this thing that's not supposed to be real, and that strong smell that came through our space that just should not be real either. I don't know what these things are, but I know I saw one, and that's the story, believe it or not, but I know what I saw. Houston, Texas. I board horses for a living. Small place out in western Missouri. It's enough pasture and stalls to keep a handful of people happy. Now, when you spend your life around horses, you learn their language. You know when they're nervous, when they're just full of beans, and when they're downright terrified. Now, horses are very intelligent animals. It was 2 years ago in the fall. The horses weren't spooked by the wind or a coyote. They were losing their minds over something else. Something else I was about to encounter myself. It was mid to late November, if I remember correctly. I do know it was around 1 in the morning. The wind had that hollow whistle. I was in bed when I heard this violent crashing outside. I could hear hooves pounding, wood slapping. My first thought was that a couple of the horses had gotten tangled up in the fence, or possibly some coyotes were after them. I grabbed my coat and a big flashlight and ran out there. The sight waiting for me, I'll never forget it. 2 of the mares were plastered against the far end of the paddock. Their eyes were rolling white, their flanks heaving like they'd run a mile. One gelding was circling frantically, snorting loud and rearing at the rails. It was chaos, and when horses panic like that, they're seconds away from injuring themselves. I started shouting, thinking my voice would calm them, but they didn't even register I was there. That's when my flashlight went along the fence line. At first it looked like a coyote or dog pacing, but then I realized how big it was. And this thing, as soon as the light hit it, it stood from 4 legs to 2. The shoulders were hunched, and they rolled in this weird motion with every step it took, like it had joints in the wrong places. It had its head down low, angled toward the horses. It didn't lunge or try to jump the fence. It just walked calmly, keeping pace with the horses, like it was going to toy with them before it strikes. It's like it wanted them to panic. It was enjoying their fear. I know this was a Dogman, for sure. Its eyes were yellow. Its snout was way too long. Its head was huge. The head almost looked like it was too big for the body. Its arms were long and skinny, and they didn't swing right when it moved. This thing was too heavy, too tall. It didn't look anything like a man. It didn't look anything like a dog either. It looked like both had been crammed together by something evil. I started smelling something that reminded me of blood or rot. Very strong, unmistakable smell. It was extremely potent and concentrated, and when it would hit the back of your throat, it would make you gag and almost vomit. The horses refused to go near that stretch. They were swerving away like it was on fire. Every time the gelding circled too close, he'd buck and lunge the other way. One of the mares tried to leap the rail to escape and clipped herself and cut her foreleg pretty bad. I had to haul her in the next day for stitches. I should have gone back inside and called the sheriff, but here's where I made my mistake. I took a few steps closer, the flashlight on it. That was when it froze and lifted its head. The look it gave me wasn't animal at all. It was awareness. It was intelligence. The eyes had a human appeal to them. This thing was not normal, not something that should be walking around out there. I can't describe to you the feeling that came over me. I don't know if it was trying to measure me up or what, but the barn floodlight came on when I got close enough, and as soon as it did, the thing dropped low, crouched like a runner at the start line, and ran along the ditch. It wasn't running super fast, but it was smooth, powerful strides, keeping itself low to the ground. Within seconds, it melted into the hedgerow and was gone. I just stood there, with the flashlight trained on nothing. The horses wouldn't calm down for nearly an hour. I don't know what it was doing. I don't think I scared it away from its plans. If it was thinking about taking one of the horses down, I do believe strongly that it would have, whether I was out there or not. I have no idea the purpose of this visit, but it has changed my life. I'm not sure what this means, but for weeks my boarders noticed their horses wouldn't graze near that corner where I saw it. They'd eat all around it, but left a neat half-circle bare. Horses don't lie, Reels. They remember. I've kept the floodlight on that corner ever since, and sometimes at night I think I hear a soft thump of hooves when nothing's even there. Like I said, this kind of messed me up. The mares will raise their heads at the same time. I know what that means. I didn't sleep very well for a long while after that. I'll tell you the truth. If the animals hadn't blown up that night, I would have never noticed it at all. J. Western Missouri. Reels. I've been a hunter all my life. Coon hunting, mostly. Some folks fish, some golf, but I've always had my dogs and my spotlight. I'd take a cold night in the woods over anything else. That was my routine, my peace, until the night my dogs flat out refused to hunt. I live in central Arkansas, plenty of pine ridges and creeks around here. My two hounds, Boone and Copper, are trained up solid. They'd jump out of the box so fast most nights I had to hold them back. That's why what happened is something that will bother me for the rest of my days. It was late fall. There was no wind. It was cool out. It's a night, if you're a hunter and you go out in these late fall nights, you know that it's a night you can hear everything. I parked by the edge of the cutover, grabbed my light, and dropped the tailgate. I expected the usual dogs spilling out, noses down, tails whipping. Instead, they froze at the edge of the box. Boone let out a low, worried whine. Copper tried to crawl under him instead of hopping down. I didn't know what to think. Even if there were coyotes close, they still wouldn't act like this. I gave them the command, and nothing. Boone just tucked his tail, and Copper started scraping at the rubber mat like he wanted to bury himself. I couldn't believe it. These were dogs that lived for the hunt, acting like they were staring death in the face. That's when I heard something off in the brush. Not a deer either. This wasn't something small, this was something slow and heavy. It was a step and then a pause, and it would do that over and over, walking very slow. My flashlight caught a set of eyes for just a second between two trees. It was too high for anything that should be out there. I swung the light wider and froze. What I saw was half in the shadow, broad shoulders. Its head was absolutely massive, and it had it tilted to the left side. I could see ears pointing up off the head, and I could see that it had a very long snout that reminded me of a timber wolf. It didn't blink against my light. It didn't try to turn away. It just stared directly at me into the light. The hair on the back of my neck stood up because I realized it wasn't looking at me. It was looking straight at my dogs. That's when Boone completely lost it. He whined so loud it cracked into almost a squeal. Then he hunched down and wet himself right there in the box. I've never in my life seen him do that, not once, not even in a fight. Copper pressed so tight against the side wall I thought he'd break his ribs. I'll admit, I panicked myself. I started banging the butt of my shotgun against the truck, yelling into the dark. I didn't want to shoot because, like I said, who expects to see this, and what exactly is it? This could have been someone in a costume for all I know, but it would have had to been a damn tall person, and broad as well. This thing didn't even pay attention to me. It just kept its head tilted, like it was curious about the noise I was making. The way you or I would watch someone hammer a nail. Then, just as calm as this thing had showed up, it just walked back. I watched the shadow of its legs bend the wrong way as it turned. They bent like a dog's, not a man's. It faded into the timber without rushing, like it was in no hurry to get away from us at all. I didn't know if it actually left or if it was going into the dark where I couldn't see to ambush my dogs, or worse, me. I should have got in the truck and left right then, but my stubbornness got the better of me, unfortunately. I didn't want to put my dogs in any unsafe situation because I love my dogs. So I slammed the tailgate shut, and both of them just laid down, panting and trembling like they'd been running for hours chasing a coon. I took my light and my shotgun and walked in the direction that thing had left. I had it in my mind that I was just going to blast it if I saw it, because after I watched it walk away, I knew for sure that this wasn't a person at all. There's no way. I was going to let it have it. I never saw, heard, or found anything. I finally gave up and got in the truck and left. What's even stranger is when we got back home, Boone wouldn't even come out of his kennel for a full day. When I finally got him back in the woods weeks later, he worked, but he wasn't the same dog. He'd spend more time glancing into the dark than on the track. Copper never really recovered. I ended up just keeping him at home as just strict pet. He just would sit in the truck box and cried every time I tried to hunt. Some folks would have sold their dog at this point, but like I said, my dogs are more than hunting dogs to me. They're part of my family. Whatever these creatures are, Reels, my dogs recognized them instantly. They knew that this thing wasn't right. They knew it was dangerous, and they wanted no part of it. I've been in the woods my whole life, as I assume you probably have as well. And this was one night that I couldn't lean on the dog's courage. They told me plain, get out. And if anyone asked me what convinced me dogmen were real, it wasn't my eyes. It was my eyes accompanied by my hounds refusing to get out of the truck. Carl, Central Arkansas. Hello, Reels. I haven't been really sure about doing this, but after being a subscriber of yours for a couple of weeks, I have noticed that all of your other listeners are quite polite and very easygoing individuals. I haven't seen much negativity. Anyway, I figured it would be worth sharing my own encounter. This happened on my farm in eastern North Carolina. It was the spring of last year. I still can't walk into my barn without feeling sick to my stomach. It was around 2 or 3 in the morning when I woke up to the sound of absolute chaos outside. My goats were bawling, the chickens were going nuts, like they were being tossed around. And over it all, I heard my old mutt, Clyde. He was barking like he'd gone rabid. He's usually laid back, lazy even, but when he does bark, you pay attention. I grabbed my flashlight and a .38 revolver, pistol, and ran out barefoot. I was half expecting to find a fox or something else inside the barn. What I saw was a lot worse than that. The barn door was rattling on its hinges like something was trying to pull it open from the outside. The animals were all jammed into the far corner of the stalls, smashing into each other. There were feathers flying everywhere. Clyde was at the door, snapping and lunging. His teeth were clacking like he wanted to tear the world in half. I hit the latch and shoved the door open with the flashlight in one hand and the pistol in the other. The light landed on something that was crouched down just beyond the doorway, one arm stretched inside like it had already worked the latch loose. Not only seeing it, but I was hit with the smell of urine or something bitter. It was like a giant dog had marked the dirt and then rolled in it. It burned my nose and throat and made my eyes water. That's how I knew before my eyes caught up that this wasn't a fox or coyote. When the light finally hit it in the face, my knees nearly buckled. The snout on this thing, it was scarred along one side, and the teeth showed in what looked to me to be a grin that wasn't human and wasn't a growl either. This was a grin from some sort of giant canine. The eyes were almost a bright orange color. Like I said, it was crouched down low. Its shoulders were pushed forward, and it had a hand pushed into the barn, and the hand had long fingers with blunt black fingernails. I knew my little 38 wasn't going to do anything but tick this thing off. Clyde launched at it, barking and snapping, and for a second I thought I was about to watch my dog get torn apart. Instead, the thing made this loud hiss, jerked its arm back, and stood up to its full height on the two legs. Its head cleared the barn roof by a good 2 feet, and the floodlight caught it just long enough for me to see the way its legs were bent. These were bent like a dog's, with way too much length to them. As crazy as it sounds to even type this thing was easily 9 feet. There's no way it was less than that. It had to be at least 9 feet tall. I screamed and waved the flashlight and pointed the gun. I remember shaking a bit and feeling my heart, feeling like it was going to explode out of my chest. Clyde lunged again and caught its fur or its leg. I'm not sure what happened next. I was about to pull the trigger to try to save my dog, but he yelped a second later and stumbled back with blood running down his side. That's when the thing finally took off. But not before it turned and lifted its leg like a dog would, leaving a wet, streaming patch on the ground right by the threshold. This thing, when it lifted its leg, it looked like someone turned on a garden hose. It had to let out a couple gallons of water, or that's what it looked like. Probably wouldn't, but it was a lot. It wasn't running scared. This thing marked the place, claiming it, I assume. That chilled me to the bone. When it finally went into the trees, the animals were still panicking. The goats were still slamming themselves against the far wall. The chickens kept flapping and squawking until their feathers were all over the place. That smell of urine stayed thick. It hung there, in the doorway. I hurried up and pulled Clyde back inside. I patched his wounds as best I could, and I sat there with the light and my little pea shooter for the rest of the night. Every time the wind would blow, that smell would overwhelm me again. It was enough to make my eyes water. For days after that, none of the animals would even go near that side of the barn. The goats would pile into the opposite side and bleat if I tried to drag them any closer. Even Clyde, as tough as he used to be, he refuses to walk past that door. He'll skirt wide around it, hackles raised, and whine until I call him back. I've had coyotes harass my animals before. I've even lost a few chickens now and then, but this was something otherworldly. This thing wasn't looking for food. It was making a statement, and my animals knew it before I ever even got out of my bed. I ended up selling half the goats because they never settled again, and honestly, I didn't want to sentence them to death. I'll be honest, sometimes when it gets still outside, and the dog perks his ears toward the trees, it's almost like I can smell that ammonia stink again. It's faint, but it's there. I know what that means. That thing is probably still close by. I wonder if it lives somewhere near here. I haven't seen it again, but that doesn't mean it's not there. That's something people need to understand as well. You think because you don't see these things that they're not there? That's not a very smart way of thinking. If folks ask me now if I believe in Dogman, I don't even hesitate. I believe because I saw one, standing directly in front of me. It doesn't get more real than that. No pun intended. Thanks, Reels. You're a great dude, and I really appreciate what you're trying to do. Keep pushing forward. Keep bringing this to light. Keep searching for the truth. You'll eventually find it. We all will. Darlene, Eastern North Carolina.
Hello, Reels. This happened quite a few years ago, but I've never really spoken about it, especially typed it out for anyone to read. I've honestly been nervous to share this with anyone. You'll soon find out why. When I was 15, my parents split up. My dad didn't fight it. He was always distant, more at home walking a logging road alone than being in the living room with his family. After the divorce, he slipped out of our lives almost completely. We'd get a phone call every once in a while, maybe he'd stop by on a holiday, but most of the time, it was like he didn't even exist. By the time I was 30, I hadn't seen him in years. Then I got the call. He'd died of a heart attack. That was it. No goodbyes, no explanations. When the will was read, I found out he'd left me something none of us even knew about. He had a cabin, pretty deep into the woods. My mom didn't know, my aunt didn't know. Nobody knew. It wasn't the place he'd lived before. This was separate. It was tucked away down a washed-out road that I had to hike a few miles to even reach. When I finally came to the cabin, the sight of it nearly stopped me in my tracks. It wasn't a normal cabin. The windows were sealed with steel panels, bolted in place. The doors were reinforced, inside and out. It was stripped of anything personal. There was no photos, no decorations, no family traces. Just a bunch of survival gear, a cot, a wood-burning stove, and some rifles on a rack with ammo stacked neatly beside them. There were maps all over the walls, some marked with X's and circles, notes scribbled in the margins like, "Don't go here at specific days or time." Heard it again. Another sighting. I should have walked away, but I had no idea what to think, so my curiosity was piqued, and it forced me to stay. I decided, since it was already getting dark, that I would, in memory of my father, spend at least one night there. Just one. Now, saying that night is something I'll never be able to forget is quite the understatement. Sometime during the night, I was woke up to someone walking around outside. It sounded like a person or a number of people were circling the cabin. It was definitely something on 2 feet, not 4. I knew it wasn't an animal. Out of nowhere, this huge slam against the metal door. It was so hard the panels was vibrating and ringing. I grabbed a rifle from the rack. I was shaking so badly that I couldn't hardly chamber a round. I don't even know why I screamed out or why I thought what I screamed out would even change the situation, but I did. Without even thinking, I screamed out, "My dad left me this place after he died. If I'm trespassing, I'm sorry. I'll leave in the morning, and you'll never see me again." And just like that, the pounding stopped. The footsteps stopped. But I wasn't safe, and I knew it. Not even close. I spent the rest of that night pacing that cabin like a madman losing his mind. I couldn't sit still. Every time I tried, my legs shot me back to my feet. My throat was dry, my heart was racing. My hands were actually numb from gripping the rifle so hard. I kept hearing breathing outside every so often, and soft rumbles that never turned into words but felt as if it was aimed right at me. I've never been anywhere near that terrified in my entire life. When the sky finally lightened up, I walked out. I locked the door and never looked back. Like I said, that was the scariest night of my life. And for years, I didn't tell a soul. Not my mom, not a ranger, not a friend. I sold the cabin as quick as I could and tried to bury the memory. And I thought that would be the end of that. I was wrong. There's more to this story, more than I ever wanted to admit. If you want to hear what happened after I left, I'll send you another email. See. And of course, legends, you know me. I'm gonna dig until I find something. So obviously, I wanted the rest of the story. And he did not disappoint. Here is the second email. Reels. I'm glad you wanted to hear the rest of this, as I really feel like I need to talk about it. I honestly didn't even think you would reply to my email, but since you're here and you asked for it, there is more. I'm gonna get it all out, if that's okay. Now, I left off with the night I spent in my dad's cabin years back. The night that I swore I'd never go back. I told you how I sold it right after. I thought that would close the book. Like I said before, it turns out I was dead wrong. Here's where things go off the rails. A couple months after the sale went through, I was at home watching TV late at night. It was, at least 2 in the morning, and my phone rang. That alone put me on edge. No one calls me at that hour unless something is really wrong. When I answered, a man's voice came through. Strained, shaky, like he hadn't slept in days. He asked, "Is this name redacted? You sold me the cabin." I told him yes, that was me. He went quiet for a few seconds, and then he said something insane. "What the hell did you sell me?" His words hit me like a punch to the throat. It wasn't said out of anger, not exactly. It was said out of fear. This was a man grasping for answers. I immediately felt overwhelming guilt. I had knowingly put someone in danger. For that, I'll never be able to forgive myself. He started talking fast, almost rambling. He said him and his wife had stayed there only 2 nights before they packed up and left. The first night, he said they heard footsteps outside the cabin, and it wasn't the kind of crunch you'd expect from a deer. These were heavy, steady like a person, taking their time and circling. He said his wife kept whispering, "There's someone outside," and she wanted to leave right then and there. But they were obviously trapped. He said they had their dog with them. That dog wouldn't set foot inside the cabin. It sat on the porch whining. It would stare at the walls like it knew something was wrong. He said the dog eventually ran off into the woods and didn't come back until the next morning. Now, from what he told me, the second night was much worse. He said something slammed against the door hard enough to rattle the whole cabin. His wife was screaming, and he grabbed a flashlight and opened the door. There was nothing there, but he was hit with a smell. That was the part he kept coming back to. He said it reeked like urine, sharp and sour, and burned the back of his throat. He said it clung to his clothes even after he washed them. He admitted he tried to record something on his phone, just pointed it at the window when the noises started, hoping to catch something, anything, to explain it. He told me all he got was just a black screen, like the sound was being muted. He deleted it the next morning, saying he couldn't stand having it saved, as it proved nothing. He asked me flat out a question that I can't answer. What was your dad doing in this place? What was he into out here? What is going on? I didn't have a good answer. I told him the truth. I told him about my one night there, about the pounding on the door, the similar experiences that him and his wife had encountered. I told him that I'd never go back, and that's why I sold the place. On my end of the line, my voice was a bit shaky. On his end, there was complete silence. Then he told me, "We're not going back, and I don't want anyone else going either." And he hung up. I sat there for a long time after the call ended, staring at the wall. The thing that I'd buried, or tried to bury. The thing I thought that I had escaped. It was still there, and now someone else, someone innocent, had seen it too. About a week passes and I get another call, this time from a neighbor in the little town closest to the ridge. I knew this guy. He was older. He knew my dad back when he was still around. He said, "Folks have been talking. Deputies have been seen driving up toward your daddy's place 2 nights in a row. They were just easing up the ridge with flashlights out like they were looking for something or someone." I asked him what people thought it was, what they were saying was happening. He lowered his voice like someone might be listening and said, "We've had complaints of strange sightings and strange nights people have had. That's all. But listen, you sure you want folks knowing that was your family's place?" That question got under my skin. He didn't say it in a mean way, more like he was trying to protect me. But it landed heavy, like just being connected to that cabin was a stain. The final straw for me came not long after, when I got a call from a ranger. I didn't know him, but he knew me apparently. He asked about the property, wanted the exact coordinates. He said they'd had a handful of unusual calls from that particular ridge. Noises, lights, people spooked out of their campsites. I asked him if they'd found anything. He paused for a second too long and said, "No tracks, nothing, no sign of anyone. No solid evidence that anyone was there. Just people hearing things that they don't understand." The whole sentence came out rehearsed, like he'd said it 100 times before. Then he added something that's burned into my memory. He said, "Sometimes the best thing we can do is keep the public calm. If it's a bear, we call it a bear. If it's something more, then it's best handled quietly." Handled quietly. That was his exact phrase. Before he hung up, he asked me to not repeat what we had discussed. Said it was better for everyone that way. I took this as a mild threat. I could be wrong, but his tone definitely sounded that way. But that's when it hit me. My dad wasn't just some eccentric who built a fortress in the middle of the woods. He was dealing with something real, something other people had brushed up against too. And the officials, the rangers, the deputies, they weren't denying it outright. They were smoothing it over, trying to wrap it in a neat little explanation. After all that, I just couldn't stop thinking about it. It consumed my life. Every creak in my house at night, every dog bark in the neighborhood, I found myself listening too hard. I caught myself checking the backyard before letting my kids even play out there, even though we lived nowhere near that ridge. The fear had followed me home. And then came the news that twisted the knife. The cabin itself wasn't even standing anymore. There was a fire. I first heard about it through word of mouth. That same guy I knew from the little town near the ridge called me up one morning and said, "Your daddy's place is gone." Just like that. No explanation, no lead up. I didn't want to believe him at first. I figured maybe he was exaggerating, or maybe the new owner had torn the place down. But then he sent me a photo. The cabin that I remembered as this sealed fortress, fortified place, was nothing but a black skeleton. It was burnt to the ground, the metal was twisted. The panels that had once covered the windows and doors weren't just melted. Some were bent outward like something had pressed against them from the inside before the fire finished the job. I just could not sit with this or accept it secondhand. I had to see it for myself. When I finally hiked back in, I smelled the smoke long before I got to the clearing. I saw it with my own eyes. The cabin was indeed gone. The roof had fell in on itself. The stove was nothing but a warped husk. The racks where the rifles once hung were twisted into shapes that just didn't look like they belonged to anything human-made. Ash drifted in the breeze, covering the air. The strangest part was the ground. The fire hadn't spread very far. The trees closest to the cabin were scorched maybe 3 or 4 feet up, but the forest itself was untouched. Whatever burned here burned hot and fast, and almost controlled, like it started and ended with the cabin alone. There were deputies on site when I arrived. 2 of them, walking slow through the rubble, writing in their little notebooks. They didn't run me off, but they sure didn't encourage me to hang around. I watched one of them crouch down and pick something up out of the ash, small enough to fit in his hand. He slipped it into a baggie without saying a word. I asked him what he'd just found. What was that you just picked up? He looked at me straight-faced and said, "Standard procedure." That was it. No details, nothing. He just kept writing in his notebook and ignoring me. Later, the county released a statement. They said the fire wasn't suspicious, not caused by humans. No accelerant, no signs of arson. They blamed it on the old wood stove. Maybe someone had left it burning and something happened with that. Maybe even lightning. They tried to blame this fire on lightning. Just one of those freak blazes that happens in old places, you know. They said there was no danger to the public and the case was closed. But the more I thought about it, that just didn't make sense. None of this made sense. That stove was built like a tank. There's no way. My dad maintained everything to the point of obsession. There's no wiring out there. There was nothing beyond a couple of battery-powered lanterns that he'd rigged up along the walls. Lightning? There hadn't been a storm in weeks. And I know this can actually happen, but how often have you seen lightning burn down a building? Yeah, me either. The locals didn't really buy it either. I heard a lot of talk throughout the town. One person claimed he saw a strange orange glow up on the ridge that night that it happened. Another swore that a couple of rangers' trucks had headed that way just before dark, only to return hours later without lights on, but nobody had photos, nobody had any proof of any of this. It was just talk that trailed off into silence when outsiders asked too many questions. I couldn't stop staring at those bent panels. The way they bulged outward didn't look like collapse from fire. It looked like something had been pressing, fighting to get out, until the blaze wiped everything clean. And that thought, that maybe the fire wasn't just an accident, but the way to erase something, has never left my mind. Why burn the cabin down? Why bag evidence and say nothing? Why push so hard with the line about no danger to the public? It felt less like an explanation and more like a cover story to me. I started thinking about my dad, about the years he'd spent out there alone, away from us, away from everybody. Maybe he wasn't running from us. Maybe he was keeping us safe. Maybe the cabin wasn't just a retreat. Maybe it was his battlefield. And now it was gone. The new buyer disappeared shortly after. They packed up and left. The rangers stopped patrolling the ridge. The deputies stopped driving slow up the road with their lights. It was like the fire wiped the slate clean for everyone, except for me. I was left with nothing but questions, and the gnawing feeling that my father knew more than he ever let on. Maybe the fire was an accident. Maybe it really was just a freak blaze in an old stove. But deep down I do not believe that. I think someone made sure that cabin and everything inside it was erased. I'll never have proof. I'll never have answers. All I have are ashes, bent steel, and the memory of one night where something pounded on the walls, demanding to be let in. That's the last of it, Reels. That's the whole story. Make of it what you will. See.
Reels. I don't know how many of your encounter stories you've received that start out in broad daylight, but mine does. This wasn't in the middle of the night. It wasn't around some campsite. It was on the Appalachian Trail, somewhere in the Smokies. Sun out, people hiking just miles away. That's what makes this even more terrifying for me, because I can't even tell myself it was just the dark playing tricks. I was section hiking solo last May, doing 3 nights out. I'd left camp late that morning, pack strapped on, and I was maybe 6 or 7 miles into the day. The trail was quiet, except for the birds and the wind. That's when I noticed a weird sound. At first it was faint, but it continued to get closer. These were bipedal footsteps, and not echoes of my own. This was weight. Every time I stopped to take a drink of water, whatever it was would stop with me. Every time I'd start walking again, I'd hear it a few paces later, keeping time with my steps. I kept telling myself, okay, somebody's behind me, no big deal. But every time I'd glance back, the trail curved and dipped and no one was there. Not once. That was the first time my stomach tightened up, and I truly began to get extremely nervous. The trail started climbing into a ridge section, and that's where it got worse. The footsteps weren't on the trail anymore, they were just off to the side, paralleling me in the brush. Sometimes they would seem to get closer. I could hear them, but couldn't see anything. I could hear the faint breathing of something, and there was nothing there for me to see. I can't explain it. It's almost like this thing was invisible. I had no idea what I was going to do, but I was about to panic. The first thing that came to my mind was to yell out, "Hey, bear," the way that they tell you to. Nothing crashed away, nothing ran, it just stopped. Then it started up again when I moved. This is where it burned into me. I stopped dead still in the middle of the trail and turned my head slow toward the trees. And there it was. Just a glimpse, but it was enough. It was maybe 40 yards off. It was standing upright, and it was definitely not another hiker. This thing had extremely broad shoulders. It was dark black. It was almost blending with the bark. On top of that shape, the outline of ears, sharp, reminded me of the Egyptian god creature that Anubis, I think is the name. I stopped. I couldn't move. I was watching it, hoping it would resolve into a trick of the light or something my eyes were seeing that wasn't there. It didn't.
It moved, it shifted, like it was adjusting its stance, and then it just went backward into the shade until it was gone. I told myself right then, just keep walking, just keep walking. I wasn't going to run. My instinct told me that would be the worst thing I could do. I tightened my straps and kept a steady pace, but those footsteps followed for at least another mile. Every time the wind would die, I could hear them. There was one moment where I thought it was about to come onto the trail. The brush rustled hard on my right side, and I swear I heard a low growl, but not the kind you hear from a normal dog or any type of canine. It was a lot heavier, much deeper. It was vibrating through the ground more than through the air. I just kept moving. I didn't know really what else I could do. I was kind of stuck. I didn't have a choice. I definitely wasn't going to try to stop and fight, whatever this was. Of course, before all this happened, I'd heard all kinds of stories about weird creatures and people encountering these monsters of the woods. I never believed any of that stuff. But I tell you, I do now. I finally made it, another half-mile on. I hit a section where the trail widened out and the sun blasted down through a break in the canopy. And just like that, it was gone. No more footsteps, no more growls, just silence and my own ragged breathing from being panicked and thinking I was about to die. The worst thought to me was the thought of me disappearing in such a horrible manner, and no one ever knowing what truly happened. I finally made it to the next shelter. There were 2 hikers sitting there eating lunch. I must have looked pale or still freaked out because they asked if I was all right. I almost told them. Instead, I just said I thought I'd been shadowed by a bear. They just shrugged and said, "It happens out here." But it didn't feel like that. I've been in the woods enough to know what a bear sounds like when it's moving through the woods. This thing matched me step for step and stood tall enough to cast a man's silhouette with pointed ears. That was the longest night of my life. I set up camp with a group that evening, but I didn't sleep. Every time I would hear a noise, I would tense up, waiting for the inevitable. Every time the wind would shift in a different direction, I would almost swear I could smell musky dog drifting past. I made it out the next day, safe enough, but I haven't been able to shake this memory. The sound of those footsteps stopping when I stopped is something that continues to echo in my brain. That wasn't random. That thing stalked me. It was deliberate. It could have ended me, that's a fact, but it chose for some reason not to. I'm not sure what I feel or think about these creatures. I'm at a loss. L.H., North Carolina. Reels. This happened back in 2019 when a buddy and I were section hiking the PCT through the Sierra. I wasn't even planning on writing this down, but I have been listening to a few of your uploads. I realized that what we experienced fits right in. We'd been on the trail for about a week, moving north through the high passes. It was early afternoon, maybe 2 o'clock, bright sun overhead. We'd stopped at this creek crossing to refill bottles and eat a snack before the next climb. Nothing unusual, just your standard midday break. That's when my buddy froze mid-sentence and started staring over my shoulder. I turned, and up on the switchback above us, maybe 70 yards away, there was something, a figure. Now this wasn't a person in a bright jacket with trekking poles. This was dark, something huge, and it wasn't moving like a hiker. It was just there,
watching us. Its arms hanged extremely low, almost to the ground, way past the knees. Its chest was pretty broad, and even though the sun was glaring, you could make out the outline of a head that did not look like a normal animal. It was too narrow up top, but with these points on either side that looked like ears. Neither of us saying a word. We just sat there. But we were thinking the same thing. This thing, it didn't move. It didn't wave. It didn't call down. This wasn't a human. It just stood on the switchback. After maybe 10 seconds, it stepped to one side into the rocks and disappeared out of sight. As we were rushing to pack, I remember my buddy saying something. He was trying to cope the best he could. He said maybe it's just another hiker that got off trail. That's not a hiker. Hikers can't vanish into sheer rock face cliffs without making a sound. I get it. His brain was in survival mode. I understood. As we started up the climb, maybe 15 minutes later, we were hit with a strong, sharp, and unmistakable smell. Urine. And it was fresh. It's the kind of smell you'd get if a big dog had just marked its territory, except this wasn't by a tree or a bush. It was right in the middle of that switchback, where we had to step over it. The thing must have had a bladder the size of a 5-gallon bucket. We both stopped for a split second, just looked at each other. There was nothing left to say. We both saw it. So we just stepped past it and kept moving. But that smell, it was so strong I could taste it in my mouth. It was disgusting. The rest of the afternoon we kept catching glimpses. A shadow shifting behind a rock or a boulder. Something ducking low when the trail would turn. It was always just far enough away that we couldn't be sure. But the feeling of being watched was completely overwhelming. I've never felt fear like that. By the time we hit camp that evening, we were both shook. My buddy wanted to joke about it. Maybe it was a bear standing weird. Maybe it was injured. Bears don't stand upright for that long, and they don't leave a puddle of urine smack in the middle of the trail like a warning sign. We never told anyone else that we saw on the trail. It just felt like one of those things people would laugh at. And they probably will when I type this out if you read it. But I'll say this. Whenever I hike now, I pay a lot more attention to my surroundings and what's behind me. I don't linger at switchbacks, because whatever these things are, they definitely don't want us trespassing in the woods. It marked that trail. It was making sure we knew that that stretch of woods belonged to it. And I won't argue. Anonymous, California. Heads up, legends. This next one is about a 10 on the terrifying meter. Buckle up. This is a wild one. Hello, Reels. This happened to me 3 falls ago up in the White Mountains. If telling this keeps somebody else from making the same mistake I did, then it's well worth me putting it out there. I'm not a tent guy. I like hammocks. They're lighter, quicker, less fuss. I was up on a ridge section of the Appalachian Trail mid-September doing a solo 2-night hike. The weather was good. Skies were clear, and I thought it would be an easy, relaxing trip. The first night was uneventful. I strung the hammock between 2 trees, ate a little freeze-dried meal, and turned in. Somewhere in the night, I woke up to the sound of something pacing. That's the only way I can describe it. Footsteps moving just off the trail. When I stopped breathing to listen, they stopped. When I shifted in the hammock, I heard them again. I shined my headlamp but saw nothing. I did catch the glint of eyes way too high off the ground before they blinked out. I told myself it had to be a deer, rolled over, and forced myself back to sleep. The second night, though, was very different. I decided to rig up some makeshift alarms. I had some paracord tied to some empty soup cans with some rocks in them for an extra bit of protection against wildlife getting too close. I strung in a little perimeter around the hammock. My thinking was, if it was an animal nosing around, the noise would give me a warning and probably scare it off. I fell asleep, a bit uneasy, boots inside the hammock, knife at my hip. I have no idea any time frames or what time of night this happened. But when it happened, I woke up because I wasn't on the tree anymore. The hammock was yanked hard, and suddenly I was slammed against the ground and still wrapped up like a cocoon. Before I could even try to move, I was being dragged. Fast, rough, hard. My back was hitting rocks. I had dirt in my mouth. I couldn't even get my arms free to even try to fight. Then, as quick as it started, I was just dropped, and I heard something huge huff or blow out air from its lungs very close to me. Then it took off, super fast through the trees. When I finally ripped my way out of the hammock, I was shaking so hard I could barely hold the light. The part that doesn't make any sense to me, none of my alarms went off. Nothing was tripped. Not a single can clanged. Whatever it was managed to grab me without touching any of them. That tells me one thing. It had been watching me the whole time. It watched me set up those trips. It knew where they were. There's no other explanation. There's no way I could get out of there in the dark. It was too dangerous. The rest of the night, I just sit there with my back to a tree, holding my knife. I tried to save my headlamp, so I left it off as much as I could stand it. I could hear it circling, sometimes growling, sometimes just silence so heavy it pressed against my ears and made them pop and ring. There is one noise I heard, and I swear it vocalized. This wasn't a howl or a bark or a growl. It was something close to a word. Way too close to be comfortable. Daylight. I didn't think it would finally come, but it did. I packed my stuff up and got moving. My hammock was shredded. The straps were cut clean like they'd been sliced with a razor blade. The ground where I'd been dropped was wet, and it smelled like urine. To be honest, I can't even tell you if it was from the creature or from me myself. Everything is a bit of a blur. I hiked until I found a ranger station. I told him everything. To my surprise, he didn't laugh. He wrote down the details, took my GPS coordinates, and said he'd go check it out. Later that day, him and another officer took me back up there. They saw what I saw, the shredded hammock, the cut straps, and that same nasty smell was still lingering in the area. The ranger even said, "That's not a dog," when he got a whiff of it. But when more officials got involved, the tone quickly changed. Deputies, a trooper, they asked me about drinking, drugs, if I was under a lot of stress. They suggested maybe it was a bear or someone pranking me. They told me flat out not to spread silly rumors that could scare people off the trail. One of them even leaned close and said, "You didn't see what you think you saw."
The thing is, I never said the word Dogman to them. I just described what I heard and what I smelled and what happened. And the glimpse of the eyes that were amber and higher than an animal should be. The harder I insisted, the more they tried to shut me down, like they were more worried about panic than about what actually happened to me. I walked out of there with the creepiest feeling, not just about what dragged me, but about the way those officials looked at me, like they knew, like they had heard this story before, and their job wasn't to fix the problem, but to make sure no one else talked about it. I don't use hammocks anymore. I don't hike alone anymore. And I'll never forget the sound of that breathing noise right next to my face, or the way the urine smell stuck to the ground where that thing left me. Anonymous, New Hampshire. I run trails, not competitively, just something I do to keep sane. I've been on the long trail in Vermont dozens of times, and nothing bad has ever happened. Until last summer, that is. It was early in the afternoon, maybe around 3 or 4 p.m. It was a clear, beautiful day. The trail was dry, and I had about 5 miles to knock out before heading back to the trailhead. I had headphones with me, but I wasn't using them. I like to hear the woods when I run. That's probably the only reason I caught it. Please, people, don't wear earbuds while in the woods. It's not a good idea. I was about 2 miles in when I started hearing something behind me. At first it just blended in with my own footfalls. But after a while I realized there was a second rhythm back there. Not quite in sync with me, but very close. I slowed down. I heard it slow. I stopped. Dead silence. Then I heard a stick snap, and it broke just off the trail. I wanted to believe it was another runner, or maybe a small wildlife critter. So I picked up the pace again. Within 30 seconds, the sound was back. This time it sounded closer. Whatever it was running when I ran, stopping when I stopped. It was definitely trying to keep its presence unnoticed. It makes my skin crawl just thinking about this again. I decided to test it. I cut hard left off the trail through the brush. I'm not quiet when I do that, but this thing followed and I could hear it bulldozing through the undergrowth. Heavier than me, faster than me, keeping pace no matter where I turned. That's when total fear took over. I took off full speed, and as I did, I heard something that made my chest lock up. I could hear panting. Not like a person out of breath. This was wet, deep animal panting right on my back. I risked one glance over my shoulder, and that's the image that will, I assume, forever be burned into my brain. A tall figure, bursting through the trees, walking, running upright, but ears sticking up like a wolf. The eyes were amber and glowing, and they were right behind me. Then I tripped. I went down hard, and when I finally got back up, it wasn't in my sight anymore. It was gone. But I wasn't about to stick around. I took off again until I hit the trail. I didn't stop until I saw the parking lot through the trees. I sat in my car for a good half hour. When I finally turned the key and looked in the rearview mirror, I swear I saw movement at the edge of the trees. That same dark shape standing still, watching. I've run that trail for years. I haven't been back after that, but I did run it numerous times. Running was supposed to clear my head, but now every time I lace up shoes, I just can't bring myself to go back out there.
This thing has taken something from me that I can't get back. That is unforgivable in my book. Say what you want about these things. Good, evil, mischievous, feeds on fear. Whatever makes you feel better, I suppose. But I'll be truthful. I don't think any of us know jack diddly about what these things are. But I can tell you, they are real, believe that or not. D.R. Vermont. Reals. My guy. Most of the stories you read end with someone barely making it out alive, but mine isn't anything like that. I wasn't chased or attacked. What happened to me was quieter, and in a way, in my opinion, that bothers me even more than if it would have came after me, violently. 2 summers ago, I was out on the Continental Divide Trail in Colorado with 2 friends. We'd done a 4-day loop and were heading back toward the trailhead on the last afternoon. Spirits were high, packs were feeling lighter, just a normal end of the trip mood. The last stretch was all downhill through some open country, a few switchbacks cutting back and forth across the slope. We were maybe a mile from the parking lot when I got that feeling, the one where the hairs on your arms rise for no reason. I didn't say anything at first. Then one of my friends asked, "Do you feel like we're being watched?" That is when I stopped, because I hadn't said a word about what I was feeling. We took off again, kept moving, faster, picked up the pace. Every few bends I would look back, but I never saw anything, or at least I thought there was nothing there. When we finally reached the flat near the lot and turned to look back up at the ridge we'd just come down, that's when I saw it. It was a dark figure silhouetted against the sky. It was standing right on one of the switchbacks near the top, standing upright, still, very tall, very broad. This wasn't another hiker. This wasn't human at all. And even from that distance, you could see the points on the head. Definitely ears. We all went silent. It didn't move. It didn't shift. Neither did we. We all just stood there, staring at each other, like we were frozen in time. We finally all bailed and loaded into the car as fast as we could. I was driving, and as we pulled out, one of my friends rolled the window down to yell something. I don't even remember what. That's when it happened. A howl rolled down off that ridge. This was an insane sound to hear in real life. Someone can try to explain this, but there's no way you could understand. It was deeper. It was long. You could tell this was carried with a weight in it that would make your entire chest vibrate. We drove the rest of the way in complete silence. None of us wanted to admit what we'd just seen or what we'd heard. But the whole ride home, the thought stayed there. It didn't chase us. It didn't try to stop us. It just walked us out. Sometimes I wonder if that's the whole point. Like it was making sure we left its space, and that we knew it could have come closer if it chose to. I've done a lot of hiking since then. I won't allow it to keep me from something I enjoy doing, but every time I go out there, I am vigilant, and if I feel eyes on me, that's the first thing that comes to my mind is that figure up on that ridge. I know then that it's time to get out. Be safe while out there, Reels. It's not a safe place, especially alone at night. I love the channel. I love the content. Keep doing what you're doing. You are helping more people than you realize. Anonymous, Colorado. 1995. When I was a kid growing up in Kentucky, there were certain sounds and places that never left me. The land out there held secrets. Families came and went. The government took and gave back. And in the end, those valleys kept what was theirs. Over the years, abandoned dogs from bankrupt families mixed with red wolves, coyotes, and bigger breeds that farmers had once used for work or guarding. They formed into packs. Not the skittish kind you read about. These were fearless, massive, organized packs that hunted like armies. By the time I was old enough to run those woods, there were 3 main packs: the northern, the southern, and the western. Each had their own territory, and each had its own alpha. The western pack was the largest, the most dangerous. It wasn't just the dogs, though. There was something else. Every so often I'd hear a whistle out in the woods. Not a tune, not a person whistling for their dog. It was sharp, random, and it always came from deeper in the trees. Sometimes it was so faint I could barely tell if it was real. Sometimes it was so close, I swore someone was standing just behind a tree, waiting for me to step off the trail. I never told many people about it, but every time I heard it, I felt like I was being invited or lured into something I shouldn't see. The Western Pack. One spring morning, I followed that whistle deeper than I ever had before. Abel, my dog, was with me. He was always sharp, always circling, always alert. The woods felt wrong that day, quiet in a way that didn't belong to spring. We came up on a clearing, and that's when I saw them, the Western Pack. They were hunting a deer, maybe 20 strong, but my eyes locked onto the leader, the alpha. This thing wasn't like any dog or wolf I'd ever seen. It was massive, closer to the size of a cow than a dog. Its fur was mottled, guard, hairs stranding out like a mane. Its head was huge, its teeth were strange, not shaped like normal canine teeth, and its eyes carried something that didn't feel animal. Abel did not hesitate. He went straight at the alpha, snapping and biting, trying to distract it. I grabbed the cedar club that I'd cut, what I called my ancient root club, and in my other hand I had a butter knife I'd sharpened down and fastened into a handle. The fight was chaos. The alpha lunged for me, and Abel latched onto its side, snarling, dragging it off balance. I swung that club with everything I had, striking its head, its neck, again and again. Abel bought me seconds that kept me alive. Finally, I drove the blade in under its throat. The beast let out a sound I'll never forget. Half snarl, half scream, and then it fell. The pack broke. Every last one of them scattered into the trees like smoke in the wind. The alpha lay still, bigger than anything I could have imagined standing over. But that wasn't the end of it. Through the chaos, I heard a faint bleating in the brush. Barely alive was a fawn. Its mother had been killed in the hunt, and the little thing was struggling, wounded, and terrified. In that moment, I had a choice. Drag the alpha's body back and prove to everyone what I'd seen, or save that fawn. I scooped it up, set it across my shoulders, and started the long walk home. Abel followed, limping, but still alive. The whole way back, I felt eyes on me. The hair on my neck stood up, and then I saw it. A huge black panther keeping pace in the trees. It never came closer than the shadows, never charged, but it followed us for miles. By the time I stumbled out of the woods, shirtless, covered in blood, and carrying that fawn on my back, my family thought I'd been attacked myself. When they realized what I had, Shock turned into disbelief. We nursed the fawn for a while, but eventually turned it over to wildlife officials. I told them about the alpha, about the pack. They just shook their heads. No such thing exists. A few days later, I went back with Abel to show them the body. There was nothing. No carcass, no bones, no drag marks. It was as if the thing had been lifted out of the woods by the air itself. For months, the valleys was silent. No barking, no howls. And then, slowly, the packs began to call again. The western pack returned, now led by a younger alpha. But something had changed. From then on, every dog, every howl, every set of eyes in those woods treated me and Abel differently. Hostile. As if we crossed a line we weren't supposed to. 1997. By the fall of 1997, everything in our family was changing. My oldest brother, Alan, had graduated and was about to leave for the military. My other brother, Josiah, was off to college. My mom was scattered, always on the go after NAFTA took her job. My dad worked up north when he could, sending money back when it came. The country, way of life we'd known was falling apart. Families scattered, farms abandoned, houses rotting. Tobacco country was being erased, one field at a time. I was the youngest, left in the middle of it all. But before Alan left for boot camp, we decided on one last adventure, one last camping trip. We had grown up tough, wrestling, boxing, chasing each other through fields, shooting arrows at one another with homemade bows, testing each other at every chance. We weren't strangers to challenges. And out there, past the farms and ridgelines, there was an unspoken rule. When we first moved out there, a man from the community came by. He didn't say much, just the kind of warnings old-timers handed down. But he looked us in the eye and said, "Don't go out at night without a light, and don't ever go into those woods after dark." We had heard strange things ourselves. Huge black panthers, wild dog packs, even a big black hairy thing people whispered about in tobacco country. But nobody spoke too openly. Talk like that could get your family gossiped about, even shunned. We tested the night before, gone out in the dark, dared ourselves deeper. Nothing had stopped us yet. But this time we wanted to go further, past the fields, past a linear strip where no trees grew, into the heart of the forest the locals called No Man's Land, or the Forest of No Return. I'd recently stumbled on something strange there, a glen shaped like a keyhole, crowned with twisted ancient cedar and chestnut trees. At its center was a crystal-clear pond, blue and silver in daylight. The air felt different there. I'd broken off a chunk of cedar root and lit it. It burned like an oil lamp with a red flame and incense like smoke. I'd shown my dad bragging on the strange place I'd found. So that became the plan. We would go there in the dark, with no flashlights, carrying almost nothing. Just our dog Abel, a little food, some fishing line, and the clothes on our backs. We'd set camp in the glen, fish, sleep, and prove we could face whatever those woods had hidden. It was a challenge, a dare, a farewell trip before Alan shipped out, and it turned into the scariest night of our lives. It was the weekend of the autumn equinox, during ginseng season. A cold front had pushed through that Friday, dropping the temperatures into the low 50s. The storm had shaken the ridges, stripping leaves from the canopy and laying down a golden carpet across the forest floor. That evening, just as the sun bled orange and red across the sky, we set out. 2 brothers, 1 dog, and nothing but walking sticks, a couple of snacks, and a plan to push ourselves further than ever. Abel carried a small pack with an emergency blanket and a tent. The fields glowed under the dying sunset as we cut across paths we'd memorized since childhood, past the willow tree, the moonshiner's lane, the graveyard ridge, and the old cabins. By the time we reached a linear field, my night had taken over. Hale-Bopp Comet burned bright in the sky like a second moon, but its light offered no help in the dark forest ahead. Abel froze at the field's edge. Then, without a sound, he bolted. He tore down the field along the little creek as if someone had called his name. We whistled, but he didn't come back. We told ourselves he'd circle around like always, but unease was already settling in. Crossing the linear field was harder than usual. The fresh leaves hid the faint glows of distant fields we used as markers. We had to stop, backtrack, and choose new paths by starlight. All the while the woods grew quieter, the crickets, the owls, the night calls of the valley. They faded until our footsteps were the only thing that broke the silence. Then, far off in the distance, Abel barked. The sound was faint but enough to lift us. We called back, whistled, shouted his name, but his barks always came from impossibly far and never any closer. Hours passed like that. Lost paths, wrong turns, Abel barking as if miles away. We pressed forward, scratched and beaten by branches, forcing our way through darkness and nothing but the dim green glow of our indigo wristwatch to comfort us. Finally, we broke into a shadowed glen, and I recognized the ancient cedar and chestnut stand. We were there. For the first time since leaving home, we lit fire. We snapped cedar sticks, and they burst like flares into the night. With one in hand, we made our way to the heart of the glen where the blue-silver pond rested at the roots of the ancient king chestnut. The ground was strange beneath our feet, spongy like cork or memory foam. It gave way and then returned, no matter how much pressure we put on it. We tried digging to dirt, but all we found was endless mulch, centuries of cedar and chestnut needles that never rotted, layer after layer down to our elbows. I finally found a patch of real soil near the pond, filled my shirt with it, and built us a small fire ring on top. Soon a fire burned against the dark, casting red glow across the twisted trees. We tied off fishing lines, hoping for something bigger than minnows to eat, and waited. Abel barked again, still impossibly distant. We called and whistled, but once more he went silent. Then the woods went silent too. No wind, no insects, nothing. And that's when we heard it. It started with a sound. I've always called it a metallic dog bark, but that doesn't quite cover it. There was this 1 or 2 second build-up like something sucking in air, then it let loose. Imagine a cinder block being dragged across fresh concrete, combined with the bark of a beast larger than any dog, and then slammed with the force of a dump truck's tailgate crashing against its bed. That was the sound, and it shook the ground. We'd heard it before from our house miles away, echoing across the valleys. My dad had called it the alpha dog. It was the only sound that could silence the hounds down the road. But this night was different. This wasn't distant. This was just outside the ring of trees. The bark hit us like a physical force. The fire bent sideways as if struck by a gale nearly snuffing out. My chest rattled, my ears rang. For a moment, I couldn't move. It was like sleep paralysis while standing, Every part of me shut down except my eyes. When it stopped, silence pressed in, heavy and suffocating. Then came the steps. Heavy, spaced apart. Too far for 4 legs. Too deliberate for cattle. It was like 10 cows landing on 2 hooves, each impact crushing the ground, snapping branches, shaking the earth. The thing circled the glen, fast, covering what should have been hundreds of yards in seconds. Trees cracked and swayed, the ground vibrated, and over it all came the chattering snap of massive teeth echoing like metal cooling. Alan had dropped by his pack, his eyes wide, muttering something I couldn't hear. I gripped my walking stick and cheap knife, staring into the firelight's edge. And then it charged. From the west side of the glen, it came tearing through the woods, smashing trees, roaring, with a guttural growl that rattled my bones. In less than 10 seconds, it had closed the gap, stopping just outside the glow of the fire. The force of its halt pushed a wave of wind across us, carrying leaves, sticks, and the smell of sulfur. The fire nearly went out again, flames bending flat. I stepped forward, trying to see beyond the fire's glare. Alan whispered, "No, no, no," over and over, behind me. I could see treetops shifting. Whatever this thing was, it was enormous, far taller than anything, had a right to move on 2 legs. Then it snorted, a deafening, whistling blast like a deer, but magnified into something impossible. It was like standing between 2 barges grinding together, while an air horn blared in your ears. The sound left my head ringing, the air thick with sulfur, the fire bowing once more. And then came the growl. Low, guttural, like a crocodile scaled up to the size of a mountain. The vibration shook the glen, the trees, the ground, and my very bones. I could barely keep my feet. Alan collapsed behind me, eyes shut tight, as if knocked out by the force. I stood there, stick raised, knife in hand, tears brimming in my eyes. I didn't move. I couldn't move. Finally, with every ounce of anger and fear boiling inside me, I screamed back at it, a raw, defiant yell into the darkness. The thing rumbled again, trees bending and snapping in silhouette. For a moment it felt like the world itself darkened, our fire fading into black, as if the presence swallowed the light. And then slowly it began to back away, step by crushing step. The forest groaned under its weight until at last it melted back into the silence. But we knew it wasn't gone. Not really. We sat frozen, staring into the dark. Neither of us breathed much, afraid even a gasp would call it back. The silence stretched on so long I didn't know if minutes or hours had passed. Then our watches beeped. Alan's was off time, flashing 12 like it had been reset. Mine said 1 a.m. We realized the night wasn't even half over. We couldn't wait until morning, not with that thing out there. So we made a decision. If we were going to die, we weren't going to make it easy. We'd set the glen on fire, light the sky up, and run for home. At least people would see. At least there'd be a sign of where we were. Alan built the signal fire, stacking everything he could find until flames roared 20 feet high, glowing red against the ancient trees. I fashioned torches from cedar bark and roots, binding them tight with strips that burned like oil. They lit quick, throwing long shadows into the dark. That's when we heard it, the rally cries of the wild dogs to the south, barking, yipping, the unmistakable sounds of a pack pulling together for a hunt. The sound made our blood run cold. We couldn't go south. We couldn't go west. The beast had come from there. North was no good either. East was our only hope. If we could just find a road, maybe we'd live. So we lit our torches, turned our backs to the blazing glen, and ran. The torches worked, but you couldn't carry them like in the movies. If you held them out in front, you blinded yourself. You had to keep them above your head so your shadow blocked the glow, letting your eyes adjust to the faint circle of light. We tore through fields and woods running like our lives depended on it, because they did. Behind us the glen burned red against the sky. Ahead the forest swallowed everything. Then the woods grew thicker. We dropped into a slate-bottomed creek valley that twisted and turned, slowing us down. Our torches began to dim, the glow shrinking. The howls grew louder. The dogs were closing in. Alan's torch sputtered out first. Mine died seconds later. Darkness fell so thick I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. Not even the stars showed above. It was as if the world itself had gone black. We dropped to our knees, whispering hoarse. "Where are you?" Back and forth. The only answer was the dogs closing in. We lit our indiglo watches, waving them weakly in the dark like signals. Green glows pulsed for the 3 seconds at a time before fading again. I fumbled for the magnesium striker in my pack. Showered sparks onto the torch head. Nothing. Did it again and again. Sparks flying so hot they dried the wet leaves underneath. Yet the cedar wouldn't catch. It made no sense. Earlier that wood had lit like gasoline. Now it was dead. Alan hissed, "What's wrong? What's happening?" I tore the cedar fibers apart, piling them dry. Showering sparks until my hands burned. Nothing. Not even smoke. Then I noticed the dark. It wasn't just night anymore. It was darker than night. The fire from the glen was gone. The stars were gone. Even the comet was gone. It was like we were cut off from the sky itself. I stumbled toward Alan, guided only by the weak flash of his watch, until he grabbed my arm. And in that moment, I realized we weren't just being hunted by the dogs. Whatever we'd faced at the glen had followed us, and it wasn't finished yet. The blackness pressed down like a weight. It wasn't just dark. It was like standing at the bottom of the ocean, every ounce of air squeezed from your chest. My ears rang, my vision swam, and my legs gave out beneath me. Alan was muttering again, voice high and panicked. "No, no, no," like he was half out of his mind. I couldn't even answer him. It felt like something had reached into my head and flipped a switch, shutting me down one part at a time. Then came the sound. Not the dogs, not the wind, not the fire. The same guttural rumble from the glen, so deep it rattled our bones, so loud it made the ground shiver. It was closer now. Too close. I don't remember falling, but I must have. 1 second I was on my knees trying to spark a fire. The next I was flat on the ground staring up at nothing. The stars were gone. The comet gone. Even the faintest outline of the trees gone. Just a ceiling of black. For a while I couldn't move. I couldn't even think straight. Time slipped. Minutes stretched into hours. Hours collapsing into seconds. Then, like a switch being flipped, the pressure lifted. My lungs filled again. The night sounds returned. The crickets, the owls, the wind moving through the branches. And just like that, it was as if the forest had snapped back to normal. Alan was curled up shaking, eyes wide, his watch blinked faintly in the dark. The numbers wrong, scrambled like it had lost all memory of time. My own watch had stopped completely. We stumbled out of that valley, with the first light of dawn, dragging our feet, half dead from fear and exhaustion. By the time we made it back to the edge of the linear field, Abel came running out of nowhere, tongue hanging, tail wagging, like he'd never left us. But we knew he had. We knew he'd been somewhere else that night, with something else. And from that day on, the whistle never called to me again. Friends, legends, family. There it is. The saga. 1995 through 1997. From the rise of the wild packs to the killing of the Western Alpha, to that night in the glen when time itself seemed to stop. Now, before anyone chimes in and says, "This sounds like a novel or a book," that's because this person is thinking about writing a book, and this was written like a novel intentionally. I won't give their name here because they never specified whether to do so or not. But the email was sent from Houston native. So if you hear this, brother, and you decide to comment and let everyone know, that's your decision. Here I will read his email that I received with this story attached, so you can better understand what happened here. Hey man, so I've written down I think too much, but not enough all in the same. I don't know if it fits the format, but I also don't write like most others. I have a lot to say, but not sure how to say it if you know what I mean. I will attach the 3 PDFs I have written out so far. I added chapters and stuff, though it's not really needed. I'm debating about writing a book. There's a lot to read here, but each has its own part to help understand what we went through while we lived there. Apologies, this may be more than your average viewer, but I have been watching your channel since you had like 800 subs. I have thought long and hard about who to tell this to and when, if I should, and how. With so many people coming forward and talking about the strange and unusual, I don't feel quite as embarrassed about talking about it. I even did my own YouTube channel there for a little stint, but I'm not too tech savvy, so I gave up on that. I haven't written it like most submissions. I wrote it out like a novel, and I still have more to say. Let me know what you think, if anything. Thanks. I broke it up into years. Each kinda has some details to help understand the next. So to say, and yes sir, the even years have events also, but I figured I'd start with the odd years.